For my community health assessment, I performed a windshield survey on the town near my home. It is located around an hour from here and called Meshoppen, PA. In this town, drug use is a significant problem. When discussed with funeral homes and coroners, the common theme about Meshoppen was that the drug overdoses have become fairly prevalent in this area. Meshoppen has 536 people and is 0.71 square mile town, per the 2016 census. This population consists of 86% Caucasian, 10% Hispanic, and a small array of other ethnicities. English is the most prevalent language, but Spanish is not yet uncommon. The average resident age is 34 to 40 years old. And on this slide, you'll see a picture of what looks like a national bank, which is what the original building was used for, but now it's currently a library. This is the original building, but as you can see, there's been some remodeling. In these pictures, you'll see the old mill. This is one of the historical landmarks of Meshoppen, and it's even on the registered list of Pennsylvania's most historical landmarks. I found this interesting because the building is completely caged in, and no one is allowed to go inside of the building. You would think that for a landmark like this, you would be able to admire the history. On the left is a picture of the back of the building that you can see from across the river, and on the right is a picture of the front. It's said that all the mill machinery is still standing inside, but no one's been inside in years. Meshoppen means the place of beads. This is a term that came from the Indians that used to reside here. The picture on the slide, it's hard to see, but it's a picture of the Indian caves. Some of my cousins have even climbed up and been inside of the cave. And they say that you can climb all the way through the mountain and come out on the other side because that's where all the Indians used to live. But I wasn't climbing up this mountain to check for myself. These are just some pictures to show the structures of Meshoppen. On the left is a short video of what the sidewalks look like. They're unkept and covered with gravel and leaves. If you can click on the video and actually watch it, you can see how dirty and not kept the sidewalks all are. And on the right is a picture of the bridge that was built when the town was more thriving, but you can see that it's still standing to this day. In Meshoppen, the Susquehanna River is a physical barrier. This has caused multiple devastating floods, and the township is even trying to enforce a flood zone. This flood zone would be tearing down over 12 homes. The picture on the left is of one of the streets that would be torn down in this flood zone. And as you can see, there's a lot of homes, and there's people living in every single one of them. On the right is actually a church that I attend when I'm home, and I thought it was important to include this for my community because religion may be a route that individuals struggling with drug abuse may choose. Like in AA or other types of therapy, a lot of groups are held in churches. But when I interviewed with an avid church affiliate, she explained that the numbers of members of the church declines each year because the older generation are unable to attend anymore, and there's hardly even a younger generation to speak for. And even in my own experience, I've realized that the Sunday school itself has completely declined in the last few years. Meshoppen has a rising issue with overdoses and drug addiction. Sheldon Kukushka Funeral Home, which is you can see in this picture down here on the left, gave me some statistics and on the rise of overdoses in Wyoming County. In 2015, there were 15 to 17 deaths due to drugs. And Sheldon, he told me that this may be what we call a hot load of drugs, or because it was prior to the increased use of Narcan, but it's hard to tell. Then in 2016, there were 10 deaths due to drugs and 2 deaths considered natural deaths. These natural deaths were from heart or lung disease and were essentially caused by the use of drugs. Then finally, this year in 2017, there are currently 8 reported drug overdoses and 5 pending tox screens. Some things to take into consideration are that if a patient is giving Narcan and then rushed to a Scranton or Wilkes-Barre hospital, and they pass away at that hospital, they're no longer considered a Wyoming County overdose, even though that's where the overdose actually occurred. Also, by the time the coroner gets to the homes of the individuals, it's sometimes possible that the family or friends have already cleaned up the evidence of drugs. A contributing factor to the town's decline corresponds with the increasing crime rates. There has been 8 assault crimes, 4 burglaries, and 34 theft crimes. On the crime index, this makes Meshoppen only safer than 1% of cities. So when I interviewed a Meshoppen resident about the crime and her safety, she reported that crime is definitely a problem and she no longer feels safe walking around anywhere in town. This is no surprise considering there are only 2 employed police officers. And if you remember back on this slide, the picture up on the top right is actually the police's office. And that little door there, there's a 1 cell in there that they could potentially keep an offender. The significance of my assessment weighed heavily on addiction and the crime rate correlation. This is a rising concern in the increase of overdoses and drug use in this small town, which in turn is leading to an increase in crimes. Only 2.3% of the population have earned their baccalaureate degree or higher. I found that there is a significant lack of knowledge in Meshoppen, PA throughout my assessment. So there's a lack of facilities for the people that already are struggling with drug abuse, and the crime rates are increasing, and there is a severe lack of education on the matter. There's also a severe lack of services when it comes to healthcare for Meshoppen. The closest drug rehab facility is 17.45 miles away, and the closest rehab program is 25.56 miles away. The closest NA or AA meeting is 9.6 miles away, and this is very concerning considering the amount of addicts that seem to be in Meshoppen. Meshoppen has an ambulance crew that is located right in town, but there is a substantial drive to any hospital. There actually are 2 hospitals close, Montrose and Tunkhannock, which are about 15 to 20 minutes away, but if there was a severe drug overdose, they'd most likely be taking the patient directly to Scranton or Wilkes-Barre, which would be over an hour drive. This picture you can see is a picture of what used to be a hospital. It was a hospital back when Meshoppen was thriving, and now it's just used as a warehouse for furniture. Primary prevention would most likely focus on the adolescents of the community. This would involve education from primary healthcare providers, seminars at schools, and getting these adolescents involved in programs as soon as possible. Some examples that might be helpful would be Students Taught Against Awareness and Resistance, or STAR. This is a program that helps teenagers to avoid high-risk activities. Also, there is a Strengthening Families program, which focuses on drug-abusing parents and their children. So some of those would be good for primary prevention of drug abuse. Secondary prevention, in addition, which may be called relapse prevention. This includes the healthcare provider being aware of early signs of drug abuse because the patient may turn to new drugs after quitting the original. A few examples of this prevention measure would be frequent therapy, monitoring, and constant counseling. Tertiary prevention would include treating the consequences of drug addiction and encouraging treatment so further disability is minimized. All these prevention measures should be discussed at length with the residents of Meshoppen, because I have a feeling that most of them don't know even that there are prevention measures against drug addiction, and that if they were properly educated, that it could significantly decrease the drug use. Some of the health promotion and best strategies for Meshoppen could include an increase in Narcan distribution. One of the articles I read discussed the use of naloxone, or Narcan, and it provided a basic education and training efforts. Through this, they encouraged the ability of resources and the ability to leave the emergency department with a naloxone kit on hand, or open pharmacies for kit pickups. This concept was given to the general public for more knowledge, and so that action could be put into place in the instance of an overdose even quicker than waiting for the ambulance crew. Another journal article explains how the criminal justice system can help aid in the treatment of drug abuse. This article explained how a majority of criminal offenses are by drug abusers, and by instead punishing them with jail time, you could punish them with treatment. Offenders would be provided services that they would not normally seek on their own. This is important to note because only a small percentage of these addicts would seek this treatment voluntarily. A third article was about a program called Reclaiming Futures. This organization focused on testing juveniles for drug and alcohol upon first offense. This prevented more crimes from occurring. After the screening tests positive, an assessment is conducted and a care plan is put into place. Every 6 months, the program will survey the individual to monitor their progress. It would be good for Meshoppen to develop a program like this to get to the root of the cause of the drug abuse with the youth. The youth is where the key focus needs to be for Meshoppen. The evidence presented in the literature would most likely really help this community out. On top of these studies, Meshoppen should continue to implement education programs. For example, I interviewed Liz DeWolf. She's a grieving mother who lost her son to a heroin overdose in 2015, and now she spends most of her time spreading her knowledge to the public and educating the youth. She specifically works with Wyoming County to increase resources for drug users and increasing awareness. She's done this by providing walks for addiction, detox treatments, Narcan seminars, multiple addiction rallies, and many education nights at the local libraries. If Meshoppen could help aid Liz in her mission to provide education to get more resources for the struggling addicts, it would open a lot of opportunities for the communities. She's been mostly working with Wyoming County in Tunkhannock, but if she could bring some of these resources to Meshoppen, she just wants to get the word out, especially if Meshoppen is one of these high-risk areas. Also, some other examples of strategies for Meshoppen would be to bring rehab and treatment options to the citizens by providing transportation or getting groups to form in this town. It would definitely be helpful for Meshoppen. Since they've been traveling so far to get rehab, I'm sure a lot of people just don't go. Lastly, by increasing the surveillance in the high crime areas. Since there's only 2 police officers in the whole town of Meshoppen, it would definitely be beneficial to increase the police force in these areas, and that could limit some of the initial drug use and crimes and provide a safer town. I found these 2 websites that show you some of the symptoms of drug abuse and some treatment options that you would have if you have a family member or suspect that someone you know is struggling with this horrible disease. Thank you for listening.